want to go to Kimberly Dvorak, award-winning national security, border security investigative reporter for TV and the print media. Kimberly, by the way, is the senior foreign policy advisor for the Committee for Responsible Foreign Policy. She is a TV correspondent at CW6 News San Diego, as well as One America News Network. And Kimberly, how are you, lady?
I'm fine. Thank you, Chuck.
Kimberly, are you?
I hear you.
I hear you too, Chuck.
Okay.
You're not in a well.
No.
Are you in a bad pit, by the way, on the golf course?
Well, I did make it over the swamp yesterday, so that was a good news.
I saw that. Yeah, you're real proud. Man, that takes a lot of muscle power, or was there a lot of wind?
Yeah, there's always hot air here in D.C.
It makes the balls go up, yes, I know. Hey, some very serious stuff. If we have time, we're going to get into what's going on with Iran. But Kimberly has been looking into some of these journalists that have been killed in Mexico.
Which is in.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Tomas was there for a second. That's okay. But anyway, you did a report here on, you say he was blessed with 9 lives and a humorous touch.
Yeah.
You call him as Hector Felix, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Hector Felix Miranda, better known as Felix the Cat, they called him, right?
Yeah. Well, being a journalist and working in and around national security and foreign policy issues, often we're mostly focused on other countries. We're focused on, war, getting out of war, getting into new wars, and how we make all of this, policy that congressmen and senators just don't seem to understand that it's very important for our country. We don't really, take a look at journalists too much. I know that everybody was talking about Khashoggi when he was murdered, presumably, allegedly. They haven't found the person guilty just yet, of murder by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So that kind of brought it up to the surface. But this young man has actually just come up, in Minnesota and actually did an exhibit on this. And it was a very interesting story. And so it piqued my interest to kind of look into the journalism factor. And, when we're talking about, gun violence and how dangerous it is to be a journalist, the third most deadly country to be a journalist right now is in Mexico, and that's our neighbor to the south. And it doesn't seem to bring any kind of news coverage of what happened this past week in Mexico. 3 journalists were killed this past week alone. So, when you look at journalism in kind of its entirety and you see what mainstream media kind of tends to focus on, it seems, that maybe they have to start focusing on where violence actually really is occurring on extremely high numbers. And Mexico has hit an all-time high in their entire history of their country for murder this year. That's staggering. It's up 33% from last year. That is staggering. These numbers are staggering. And these are only the numbers that are getting reported. Who knows what the real numbers are? We know people get disappeared all the time.
And also, be sure to go to Facebook.com and also, what's that other one there?
Periscope.
Yeah, Periscope.com. And Kimberly is streaming live as we speak. The country of Mexico, for example, throughout the 1970s and the 1980s, they were the most dangerous country in the world, all of Latin America, for the most attacks against the press.
Yeah.
And the main thing is drug traffickers and corrupt law enforcement. And I'm telling you, I did a little research on it over the weekend, Kimberly, and it is very, very disturbing.
It is.
And it's, you can't blame Trump. It's not him going after the Mexican press, okay?
Yeah.
It's not like CNN over there. You just don't talk about the drug cartel.
Yeah.
That's it. They just say,
Yeah.
no such thing as free press.
Well,
No
I think as well, we have to keep in mind too that the United States, arrested El Chapo. He was extradited from Mexico. He was brought here. And so now you've got a lot of the various drug cartels and area gangs. They're all fighting for that drug trafficking route. So the violence typically after one of the larger fish, so to speak, in the drug world is apprehended or killed, there tends to be this like cycle of violence, because now you've got all these various organizations who are vying for those very lucrative, routes that get people, human trafficking and drugs, terrorists, and all kinds of illegal activity, get all those people across the U.S. southern border. So that we can actually attribute some of this violence to. But when will this stop? We just don't know. And Mexico's a very, very dangerous place. And as our neighbor, we ought to be focusing a lot more on what's going on down there in Mexico.
But then again, you remember when we had the guy in Texas from Mexico?
Yep.
Texas has the death penalty execution.
Yep.
And remember how Mexico's governor and a lot of representatives in Mexico were raising holy hell, so to speak.
I think it was for LaBarbie.
Yeah,
I think his name was LaBarbie. I think his nickname was LaBarbie.
And of course, this was under previous president in Mexico. Yeah. But they interfered with our politics very, very much. Came to that guy in Texas. And right now, they're talking. You mentioned El Chapo a while ago. They're also speaking about him. It's not fair. He's not going to survive in a maximum security prison. In other words, he can't escape from the ones you guys have.
Yeah.
Well,
who knows how long he'll survive? I mean, he's getting older as well. He has health issues, and it just it's an issue in this country because he was able to export all of the record numbers of drugs crossing the border. But we also have to keep in mind that the U.S. is a pretty good customer when it comes to that. So. The violence we're seeing in Mexico, I certainly will not blame on the United States per se, but we'll say that, look, right now they've got a void, and right now they're going to fill the void. And it's just like what happened in Libya and in Syria and in these other countries. When there is a leader that is disposed of, then the internal politics starts playing, and you see this, taking place. Actually, a very good example is Turkey. They became a dictatorship. Essentially, Erdogan became the dictator. And the very first thing he did was crack down on journalists. And now, they have some of the strictest journalism, anti-journalism laws in the world. And he's now a dictator. But he recognized that he needed to go after the journalists, because even if you kill people, if there's nobody there to report on it, the people are none the wiser. So, the journalism is, our First Amendment for a very big reason.
Well, I was going to say, you're really messing with number one there.
Yeah.
Freedom of the press. And I never, ever want to see it where, any president would have the authority, to clamp down on CNN, for example.
Yeah.
Let them go ahead and spew whatever. I'm trying to think. You remember the kids, Covington School, I guess
yes.
It was? Yeah. I saw today a report, didn't have time to get into it, but CNN invited one of the kids to come on, and he started saying, we weren't, no, stick to the script.
Yeah.
Stick to the script. Don't be rattling on what you think.
Yeah.
And I'm going, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Hey, by the way, all the drugs coming across, and we definitely have that opioid crisis. I don't have the figures in front of me, but I know it was more people killed than in the Vietnam War, daily. And now, last week, President Trump said that he's going to be allowing importation of medicine from Canada for cheaper prescription drugs. Now, some people would say, no, that's entirely different. That's not the stuff that's killing people. No, it is, because if you can't get the stuff that you really want to stop the pain, then you go to the drug cartels, what they're bringing across. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah, and I think also that we saw a huge number of states, legalize marijuana, California being one of them. And I think that what happens when you go through something like that, looking back, maybe we shouldn't have done that. They haven't said that, that crime or usage has really gone down. It's actually had the opposite effect. But I think when you put, when you open the market to that, then the cartels are going, okay, well, that was one of our big markets. So now we've got to make our drugs more potent so we can overcome that, gap that people are buying, marijuana in California and DC and various other states across the country. But I think that was kind of an unintended consequence of the legalization of marijuana, because now more people are ODing, because most of the overdoses are attached to this fentanyl. And the fentanyl is what's killing all these people that are using the opioids. So again, you're not picking this up at CVS. I just always like to state that with people. You're not getting this drug these people are overdosing on at CVS or Rite Aid or wherever you are.
Two quick things here. Number one, when I was working with George Putnam, who created this program, he always talked about a great study done about, smoking marijuana and people hooked on heroin. And it was like 70%, maybe that high, of all the people that were hooked on these bad drugs all started out with marijuana. And see, it's sort of like, I wonder what would happen if I take another step forward, because this is pretty cool. Mm-hmm. But see, in California, Kimberly, which, she's a California San Diego girl, okay? See, they had the Attorney General at the time, or whatever, Kamala Harris.
Oh, yeah.
See, she arrested all the people she could to get a bunch of cheap labor. And they were all using marijuana, and then she bragged about it, and her father and mother, I guess, got down on her on it.
Yeah.
So now, no, she's all for it or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just think that, it's what people do to their own bodies. I mean, obviously, this country, we have a constitution, and people are pretty much, you're allowed to kind of do what you want in your home if it's not hurting your neighbor, so to speak. But I just think that, when you're starting to see this violence escalating and all of that, there are multiple causes for this. I mean, the video games, what we watch coming out of Hollywood, it has desensitized the entire, millennial population there. And you're starting to see these things. You and I, we went to high school. We never thought about going and taking a weapon or a firearm to our high school. We never thought about taking it to Walmart and using it against other people as well. So you have to start looking at the real reasons of where this violence is coming from. And you can look at the video games manufactured and, put out for all the millennials and the Gen Zers. And that's, this violence is coming from Hollywood as well. Where are they on all this?
Graphics unbelievable. And like me, I'm an old man here, but anyway, I'm not. My video game, was a pinball machine. All right, that's exclusive. We came to it.
Hey, I had Pong. Pong was my first one. The Atari. Yeah, Pong. Boom, 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 boom.
I played River. Did you ever hear River Raid? I love that game.
Yeah.
Flying airplanes.
Yeah.
Trying to get up the jump before you ran out of gas.
Exactly. Those were the days.
I didn't get any gas. I'm going to go kill people.
Yeah.
Right? And it's Trump's fault. You should have made this game easier.
Yeah.
It's way out of hand, and I don't know. It's good to have entertainment, but I was watching your expression. It's good to have entertainment.
Yeah.
Even for the children. But why is it they say we got to outdo you and we're going to make it more realistic?
Yeah.
And
this is
in these two shootings.
And this is where we've come, sadly, as a country. It's like Hollywood has to make everything more gory. In the old days, you would hear the music, and then somebody would like the Psycho, and you could see the person like doing the motions, but you never saw the blood and guts of it all. And now it's just that they've completely desensitized this, younger generation. And for them, I think at the end of the day, they, these young people also, we got to, stipulate the majority, if not all of these people that commit these mass shootings are taking psychotropic drugs, which is big pharma. We got to keep that in mind as well. But we're desensitizing where I think some of these people, they're thinking, they're going to get up at the end of the day and walk home because this was just a game. And then also the media just cravenly covering this relentlessly is giving people a reason. Hey, I want my 5 minutes of fame. I'm going to get it. It's a very sad way to get it. But, again, you look at, the violence in Mexico, you look at the violence all over the world, and where the violence, is down in Mexico, you can't own a firearm to protect yourself. So just look where your government will go once they have taken away your ability.
What is it they're saying? These mass shootings occur because the mass people are not allowed to defend themselves.
Yeah.
And people would say, "Oh, it would go crazy."
Yeah.
Hey, listen, if you get a chance, I want you to check out duck.go, the Democrat Socialist Convention.
Oh yeah.
Over the weekend in Georgia.
No, yeah.
And that'll show you. Boy, I'm telling you, when you let little things upset you as much as these people, don't you call me a guy. Hey, you guys, shut up.
Yeah.
You know, I'll tell you something.
Sensory overload. I like that one. I have sensory overload. What is that?
Oh, yeah. Hold their little signs up because that takes the place of applauding.
Yeah.
Hey, we're going to get real serious with Kimberly Dvorak when we return. Iran ready to strike. And, you know, one of those Democratic candidates is saying, well, we're going to have a second response. Never first response. That's kind of asking for it. Hey, we are here. Chuck Wilder with Kimberly Dvorak, and let's get into Iran.
Yeah.
And you know, we'll be talking about Hezbollah.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of people say, "Oh, yeah, they're really quiet, aren't they? Are they sleeping?"
Yeah. They're.
You know, well, that's a very good word, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sleeping. Because
Sleeping.
It ties in with the report.
Yeah.
Sleeping cells.
Yeah. Well, as we've seen the tensions kind of rise in the Middle East, the latest tension being the UK oil tanker that was captured by Iranian government and military. We've seen some reports that, I mean, the terrorists are looking at sleeper cells that they have embedded throughout Europe and in America. If the UK decides to strike the Iranians, then they will set loose, they say, the sleeper cells that they have all over the world, and they will blow up basically whatever little town that they're living in. And you know, that's something that's a very scary proposition for Americans, because it's a pretty big country and pretty difficult to kind of keep track of all of these sleeper cells. Now, the one thing that I think is kind of concerning about this latest ship attack is how brazen the Iranians are with this. And I'm just going to read this because it's an excellent quote by them that they put out over the weekend. And it said that, make no mistake, and this is the UK and America, Iran's foreign minister warned the UK on Twitter, saying, having failed to lure Donald Trump into the war of the century, John Bolton is turning his venom against the UK in hopes of dragging it into a quagmire. And the Iranians' response to that was putting out this tweet that they would, let loose these sleeper cells that they have around the world. That's very dangerous. And currently, we're all sitting on pins and needles with, what's going on, holding our breath in the Middle East. And that's why it's very important for the United States to have a strong, stable national security advisor instead of one that really would be quick to pull the trigger if he could do so. Donald Trump has pulled John Bolton back from the brink, but again, how long does it take until, Bolton, gets his argument out there and is able to take this country into another unwanted war? So, I mean, these are very dangerous times, and the Brits have also found a record number of explosives in England, something that was much larger than the Oklahoma City bombing. So you're talking big numbers, and they're taking it seriously. But how do you fight asymmetrical war, which is exactly what this is?
Well, I'll tell you, see so many reports, and myself included. I didn't mind John Bolton when he would come on Fox News, give his 2 cents or his nickel or whatever. But I'm hearing so many people, reliable sources, saying, this guy, he's looking for excitement or something.
Yeah.
It's very dangerous sometimes.
Yeah.
The sleeper cells. I have a guy on quite frequently, Mike Cutler.
Oh yeah.
I used to be an INSA.
Oh yeah.
And he's done a few reports, and I always remember one story he did about this really, really bad terrorist. The guy had been driving an ice cream truck for about 5 years. That was his, it was almost like one of those TV shows or something,
Like you can't make it up. Yeah. But we let them stay.
We're getting to the close here.
Yeah.
I want to tell you something, listener. Go to KD Report, and I think you can they read this whole thing about?
Yeah, it'll be up. It'll be up by Wednesday.
Mexico.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the whole thing about Mexico, that's excellent. We could have spent a long time on that.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Of course, when you steal somebody's oil tanker, you're just asking for it. So, Kimberly Dvorak, catch her live okay, and also